Wife cheated with a coworker in front of our young son, and now strange things are happening. Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be sharing this, but after the strange events of the past few months, I feel like I need to get it all out. Maybe writing it down will help me make sense of it. Maybe someone out there has experienced something similar. Either way, here it is. My soon-to-be ex-wife and I are both 26 with a 5-year-old son and a 10-month-old daughter. I work as a manager at an IT company, and she's a receptionist at a hospital. Recently, she's been on maternity leave, so she's been home a lot. We used to be happy. At least, I thought we were. The day everything started was Saturday, July 1st, 2023. I was at my parents' house, just 5 miles away, when an ex-employee of mine, who had only started working with us in May, came to my house unexpectedly. He was 23, a young guy who seemed eager to make his mark. He had some important documents to return to me, and knowing I don't work on Saturdays, he thought I'd be home. My wife answered the door. She didn't recognize him, so he explained who he was, and she let him in, offered him coffee while he waited for me. This is where it gets strange. A few days ago, I got a call from him. Here's the conversation as best as I can remember. Do you know about me and your wife? His voice was low, hesitant. I felt a chill run down my spine. What do you mean? Explain. Remember that day last month when you weren't home and I came to drop off documents? Sorry, because I should have called you beforehand. Yes, so what? My patience was wearing thin. After your wife invited me in and offered to make coffee, we began to talk and quickly bonded over literature. She was very friendly, and I know what I'm about to tell you was very wrong of me to do, but we started kissing, and your son, who came into the living room at that moment, then asked who I was, and she told him not to worry and to just go watch TV. We then went upstairs and, slept together. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you joking? Because if you're just trying to cause trouble, No, it's not a lie. I just thought I would tell you because that little boy saw his mother with someone else, and years down the line, if you ever did find out, I wouldn't want you to think that I scared a little boy without caring. Remember that your wife is the married one, not me. I didn't force her. I don't believe you at all. My voice shook with a mixture of anger and disbelief. That is why I resigned on the 7th of July, because I didn't know whether you knew or not and would rather resign than have a sacking on my record. I'll ask her, and if it's true, I'll deal with you appropriately. Okay, but like I said, I didn't force her, nor did I do anything illegal. You won't hear from me again, sorry. I was livid with anger and hurt at the same time. This is an employee who only started working for me in May, and I was certain she never even knew he existed up until that day. I confronted my wife about it. At first, she denied everything, but when she realized the severity of the situation, including the employee quitting, she broke down and confessed. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I don't know what came over me. I looked at her, feeling a mix of betrayal and anger. Apparently our son saw you, I said, my voice cold. She began crying harder. I told her I was going to stay with my parents for a few days while I decided what to do. My parents, and even her family members, were very supportive of me and did not condone what she did. I've seen my son on FaceTime and my baby daughter too, and told them that I will be with them soon. I've decided that there is no coming back from this and will definitely get a divorce from my wife, but the only issue is custody and finances. I don't want to be like the many men who get a divorce due to the fault of their wives only to lose the house and only see the kids on weekends. How do I go about this to ensure I don't lose the house and that I see my kids as equally, if not more than her? I live in England, by the way, but here's where things get weird. The night I moved out, I had the most vivid, disturbing dream. I was in our house, but it was different. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and the air felt thick and oppressive. I walked through the house, calling out for my son and daughter, but all I could hear were whispers. It felt like they were coming from the walls themselves. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing. I tried to shake it off as just a nightmare, but the feeling of unease lingered. Over the next few days, I started noticing things, little things at first. Items in the house would be in different places from where I left them. Doors that I knew I had closed would be open when I returned. One evening, I decided to confront my wife again. I needed answers. Why did you do it? I asked her, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. She looked at me, her eyes red from crying. I don't know, she whispered. It was like ... I wasn't myself. That's not an excuse, I snapped. Our son saw you. She broke down again, and for a moment I felt a pang of guilt, but then the anger returned. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she wasn't telling me, something more to the story. I started digging, looking for anything that could explain what was happening. I found an old journal in the attic, one I didn't recognize. It was filled with strange, rambling entries about dreams and shadows. The last entry was dated just a few days before the incident with my employee. It spoke of a presence, something dark and malevolent. I confronted my wife about the journal, but she claimed to have never seen it before. The more I pressed, the more agitated she became. It was like she was genuinely scared. I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was something more going on, something beyond our understanding. I've started having the dreams more frequently now. They're always the same, the house, the symbols, the whispers. I don't know what to make of it. Is it my mind trying to cope with the betrayal, or is there something more sinister at play? All I know is that I can't shake the feeling that we're not alone in this, that something is watching, waiting. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I'm losing my mind. If anyone has experienced anything like this, please share your story. I need to know I'm not alone in this. I need to know that there's a way out. Update. Hey everyone, I wish I could say things have gotten better since my last post, but they've only gotten stranger and more unnerving. Every day feels like I'm slipping further away from reality, and I can't tell what's real anymore. Here's what's been happening since I last updated. After confronting my wife about the journal and the strange events, I decided to stay at my parents' place for a bit longer. I thought some distance would help clear my head, but the dreams followed me. Every night, without fail, I find myself back in that house, surrounded by those symbols and whispers. It's like I'm being pulled into another world every time I close my eyes. One night, I woke up in a cold sweat, feeling like I was being watched. I looked around my room and saw nothing out of the ordinary, but the feeling wouldn't go away. I checked my phone and saw a missed call from my wife. Reluctantly, I called her back. "Why did you call?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Something's happening here," she said, her voice shaking. "I can't explain it, but I feel like I'm being watched. The kids ... they're scared too." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" "They've been seeing things, shadows moving in their rooms, whispers in the walls. It's like the house is alive." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as paranoia, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. "I'll come over tomorrow," I said. "We'll figure this out." The next day, I drove back to the house. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt it. The air was thick, oppressive. My son ran up to me and hugged me tightly. "Daddy, there's a monster in my room," he whispered. I tried to reassure him, but my own fear was hard to hide. I walked through the house, looking for anything out of the ordinary. In my son's room, I found strange marks on the walls, like scratches or symbols. They were faint, almost like they were etched into the paint itself. "Have you seen these before?" I asked my wife. She shook her head. "No. They just appeared a few days ago." I felt a wave of unease wash over me. Something was very wrong here. That night, I decided to stay at the house. I wanted to see if I could figure out what was happening. I set up a few cameras around the house, hoping to catch something on film. Around midnight, the whispers started again. I followed the sound, but no matter where I went, it seemed to come from the walls themselves. I checked the cameras, but they showed nothing unusual. It was like the whispers were only in my head. Then, around 3 a.m., I saw it. A shadow moving down the hallway. It wasn't the shadow of a person. It was something else, something darker. I watched in horror as it moved towards my daughter's room. I ran down the hallway, but when I reached her room, there was nothing there. She was awake, crying. "Daddy, the monster," she sobbed. It was here. I held her close, feeling helpless. I didn't know what to do. I checked the camera footage from the hallway, but it showed nothing. The shadow was gone, like it had never been there. Over the next few days, the activity escalated. Doors would slam shut on their own, lights would flicker, and the whispers grew louder. My son and daughter were terrified, and I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Desperate, I reached out to a friend who was into paranormal stuff. I didn't know if I believed in that kind of thing, but I was willing to try anything. He came over with some equipment and did a sweep of the house. "There's definitely something here," he said, looking uneasy. "I can't say what it is, but it's powerful." We set up more cameras and audio recorders, hoping to catch something concrete. That night, we stayed up, watching the monitors. Around a.m., we heard it. A low, guttural growl coming from the walls. The cameras picked up strange orbs of light moving erratically. Then, the shadow appeared again. This time, it was clearer, more defined. It moved towards the living room, and as we watched, it seemed to grow larger, more menacing. My friend tried to communicate with it, asking what it wanted. The only response was a chilling whisper, "Leave." We decided to get out of the house, taking the kids with us. We stayed at my parents' place that night, and I started looking for answers. I researched the history of the house, trying to find anything that could explain what was happening. I found out that the land the house was built on had a dark history. There were stories of strange rituals and disappearances dating back decades. It was like the land itself was cursed. I don't know what to do. I can't subject my kids to this, but I don't know how to fight something I can't even see. If anyone has any advice or has been through something similar, please let me know. I feel like we're trapped in a nightmare and I don't know how to wake up. Thanks for reading. Stay safe. Update 2. Hey everyone, I didn't expect to be back so soon with another update, but things have gotten even stranger and more terrifying. Every time I think we've hit the peak of this nightmare, something new happens that drags us deeper into the darkness. Here's what has transpired since my last post. After our friend came over with his equipment and confirmed there was something powerful in the house, we thought it couldn't get any worse. How wrong we were. We decided to stay with my parents for a few more days, hoping that putting some distance between us and the house would give us some clarity. It didn't. While staying at my parents', I continued to have those disturbing dreams. The house, the symbols, the whispers, but now they were more intense. It was as if the entity, or whatever it was, had followed me. I would wake up drenched in sweat, feeling an oppressive presence even in my parents' home. My kids were having nightmares too, waking up screaming about the monster. One night, I woke up around a.m. to find my son standing at the foot of my bed, his eyes wide open but glazed over like he was in a trance. "Daddy, it wants to play," he said in a flat, emotionless voice. I jumped out of bed and shook him, trying to snap him out of it. He blinked and looked around, confused. "Daddy, where am I?" "It's okay, buddy," I said, my heart pounding. "Let's get you back to bed." The next day, I knew we couldn't keep living like this. I had to go back to the house to get some more of our belongings, and I decided to do it during the day, thinking it would be safer. My friend offered to come with me, and I gladly accepted his help. As soon as we walked into the house, we felt it. The air was thick and heavy, and the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. We moved quickly, gathering clothes, important documents, and some of the kids' toys. As we were packing up, we heard a loud bang from upstairs. We froze, staring at each other. "What was that?" I whispered. "I don't know," he replied, his face pale. We cautiously made our way upstairs. Following the sound, it led us to my daughter's room. The door was shut, and when I tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. It felt like something was holding it closed from the other side. "Help me," I said to my friend, and together we pushed the door open. The room was freezing, and in the middle of the floor was a child's drawing. It was one of my daughters, but it wasn't there before. It showed our family, but there was an extra figure, a dark, shadowy figure standing behind us. "I think we should leave," my friend said, his voice trembling. I agreed, and we hurried out of the house, leaving the rest of our belongings behind. That night, back at my parents', we reviewed the footage from the cameras we had set up previously. What we saw chilled us to the bone. There were hours of nothing, just the empty rooms. But then, around 2 a.m., things started to happen. The cameras picked up strange, flickering lights moving through the house. Shadows darted across the walls, and at one point, the camera in my daughter's room showed her sitting up in bed, staring directly at the lens. She was talking, but there was no sound. "What is she saying?" I asked, rewinding the footage and trying to read her lips. We couldn't make it out, so we decided to slow down the video and enhance the image. What we saw was her repeating the same phrase over and over. "It wants to play. It wants to play." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Whatever this thing was, it was trying to communicate with us through my children. I knew we couldn't go back to that house, not until we figured out what was happening. But I also knew we couldn't stay with my parents forever. The presence was becoming more intense, more aggressive. In desperation, I turned to the internet, seeking any information that could help. I found forums and websites dedicated to paranormal experiences, and while many of them seemed outlandish, some resonated with what we were going through. I reached out to a few people who had experienced similar things, hoping for guidance. One person suggested that the land itself might be cursed, that something terrible had happened there long ago, leaving a dark imprint. They recommended finding out the history of the property, digging deeper into its past. So I did. I went to the local library and started looking through old records and newspapers. What I found was unsettling. In the early 1900s, the area where our house now stands was the site of a series of disappearances. People vanished without a trace, and there were rumors of dark rituals being performed in the woods nearby. The land was considered cursed, and for years, no one dared to build there. It wasn't until the 1950s that the first houses were constructed, but even then, there were reports of strange occurrences. Families moved in and out frequently, unable to stay for long. The house we bought had been vacant for several years before we moved in, something the real estate agent conveniently failed to mention. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to my parents' house and shared what I had found with my wife and my friend. We knew we couldn't stay in the house, but we also knew we couldn't just abandon it. We had to find a way to cleanse it, to break whatever curse was on the land. As I write this, we are planning our next steps. We're reaching out to local historians, looking for anyone who might know more about the land's dark history. We're also considering bringing in a spiritual expert, someone who can help us understand what we're dealing with and how to fight it. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this: we can't let this entity, whatever it is, take control of our lives. We'll do whatever it takes to protect our children and reclaim our home. If anyone out there has any advice or has been through something similar, please share your experiences. We need all the help we can get. Thank you for reading and for your support. Stay safe. The final update. Hey everyone, this will be my last update. I never thought things could escalate to this point, and I wish I had better news to share. But it seems like the more we dug, the darker things got. Here's what has transpired since my last post. After discovering the land's cursed history, we were determined to find a way to cleanse the house and protect our family. We reached out to local historians and found a man named Arthur who was familiar with the area's dark past. Arthur was an older gentleman with a wealth of knowledge about local folklore and history. He agreed to meet with us and see if he could help. When Arthur arrived at my parents' house, he carried an old leather-bound book filled with notes and sketches. As he flipped through the pages, he explained that the land our house was built on had been the site of a series of occult rituals in the early 1900s. A cult led by a man named Edgar Thorne had conducted dark ceremonies, trying to summon an otherworldly entity. The rituals were interrupted by local authorities, but not before something had been unleashed. Arthur told us that the land had been cursed ever since. The entity that the cult tried to summon was trapped, bound to the land, and it was seeking a way to break free. The more we interacted with it, the stronger it became. "We need to perform a cleansing ritual," Arthur said, his voice grave. "It's the only way to break the curse and free your family from its grasp." We were hesitant but desperate. Arthur gave us a list of items we would need and instructed us on what to do. The ritual had to be performed at midnight, under a full moon, and it had to be done at the house. Reluctantly, we returned to the house, armed with the items Arthur had specified: candles, salt, sage, and a silver amulet that he claimed would protect us. My wife, my friend, Arthur, and I gathered in the living room, the air thick people with tension. We lit the candles and formed a circle, following Arthur's instructions to the letter. As we began the ritual, the temperature in the room dropped sharply, and the whispers started again, more intense than ever. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to move and writhe as if they were alive. Arthur chanted in a language none of us recognized, and we followed along as best we could. The room grew darker, the shadows closing in around us. My children, who were in the next room, started crying, their wails piercing the oppressive silence. Suddenly, the candles went out, plunging us into darkness. The whispers became deafening, a cacophony of voices overlapping each other. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder and turned to see a shadowy figure looming over me, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "Leave," it whispered, its voice echoing in my mind. "Leave, and you will be spared." I was frozen with fear, unable to move or speak. Arthur continued chanting, his voice growing louder and more urgent. The figure moved closer, its presence overwhelming. "Leave now," it hissed, its breath cold against my skin. In that moment, something snapped inside me. I grabbed the silver amulet Arthur had given me and held it up, shouting, "No. This is our home." The figure recoiled, its eyes narrowing. Arthur's chanting reached a crescendo, and suddenly there was a blinding flash of light. The shadows screamed and writhed, and then, just as suddenly, everything went still. The candles flickered back to life, and the oppressive presence lifted. The room felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from our shoulders. Arthur slumped to the floor, exhausted but triumphant. "It's done," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The curse is broken." We left the house that night, still shaken but hopeful. Over the next few days, we began to feel a sense of normalcy returning. The dreams stopped, the whispers were gone, and the shadows no longer moved on their own. My children slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. But as the days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The house felt different, yes, but there was an underlying tension that I couldn't explain. My wife and I decided to sell the house and move somewhere far away, hoping to leave the darkness behind us. As we packed up our belongings, I found my daughter's drawing again. The one with the shadowy figure. I stared at it, feeling a chill run down my spine. Something caught my eye, a small detail I hadn't noticed before. The figure in the drawing had eyes that glowed with an unnatural light. I showed it to Arthur, who looked troubled. "The entity may be gone, but its influence could still linger," he said. "Be cautious, sometimes these things have a way of finding their way back." We moved out of the house and settled into a new home in a different town. The nightmares stopped, and life slowly returned to normal. But every now and then, I catch a glimpse of a shadow moving out of the corner of my eye, or hear a faint whisper on the wind. I don't know if we'll ever truly be free of what happened. Maybe the darkness will follow us forever, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to return. For now, we're doing our best to move on, but the memory of that night and the entity we confronted will haunt us for the rest of our lives. Thank you all for your support and advice throughout this ordeal. Stay safe and be careful what you invite into your lives. You never know what might be waiting on the other side.